Hello, and welcome to the Cioffi Brothers Podcast. I'm Ken.
And I'm Alex.
And today we're going to be reviewing The Legend of Zelda, Link Between Worlds. For those of you who are keeping track, this is actually part 3 of our A Link to the Past trilogy review. We started with The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, the one that started it all. We did A Legend of Zelda, Link's Awakening, which was at the time the official unofficial sequel, which has been now kind of been written off as not the official sequel and is a part of separate timeline according to Hyrule Historia. And now we are doing the new official sequel, A Link Between Worlds.
Yes, this is the official sequel to A Link to the Past. In Japan, it is actually known as Triforce of the Gods 2.
Because the first one was Triforce.
Because the first one was Triforce of the Gods, so this is Triforce of the Gods 2. Why they didn't bring that numbering convention over here, I still don't know, but whatever, this is the official sequel to A Link to the Past.
Cool.
That being said, let's jump into the pros.
Why don't you lead us off on our pros?
I will. This is classic Zelda. This is classic Zelda design. That top-down isometric view that it was widely known. It is still 3D. They usually call it like a 2.5D almost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Where it's 3D, but you're still top-down.
That way. Yep.
Because this is an official sequel to A Link to the Past, it is styled like A Link to the Past in the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it controls, the way.
Well, the whole overworld map is almost a 1-for-1 of the original.
Yes.
A Link to the Past.
So we'll get into that later.
Sure.
But yeah, classic Zelda feel, and that's nice to come back to after a number of games being just straight 3D.
Yeah.
Just to have that classic, it's nice.
Cool. Very cool. Next pro is there's a lot of freedom in this game. One of the things that they've been trying to do lately is I think, and this is just conjecture on my part, and it's not necessarily apropos of anything, but I think my assumption is that the Nintendo people have heard from the Legend of Zelda fans who have maybe thought the franchise has gotten a little stale. So they've been really trying to innovate. And what they've done here that is different is you can do the dungeons in any order, which is kind of neat. And it's kind of almost a throwback to the original Legend of Zelda, which even though they had a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and even though it was a scale of difficulty, you could essentially do them out of order. You could do level 3 before you do level 2. Or you just jump around. I remember at one point I had only beaten level 3 in the original Legend of Zelda, and then I stumbled across level 8 and I found a couple of things in there. So it's kind of a nice idea that you have this freedom to go around and bounce around, and you can truly do the dungeons in any order.
Yep.
It's just any order that you want to go in, you can do it.
Yep.
So that's a very, very cool,
concept. Neat aspect of it.
Yeah.
Next pro, rupees have a purpose.
Rupees have a purpose, yes.
Finally, rupees are the currency in the Zelda universe, and in many, many games, they're typically just for side things, stuff like bombs, bombs, extra arrows, extra hearts, stuff like that aren't really essential, not even like extra heart pieces, just extra hearts to replenish your life.
Yeah.
It's stuff that's not really essential in the game, but is just kind of there if you want to spend the money to use it. And
occasionally there's shields there that you have to buy. Occasionally there's a couple of items that you have to buy that are like high rupee items.
Like the bow in Link's Awakening.
Yeah. But ultimately there does seem to not be much of a purpose for rupees sometimes. So yeah, it was very interesting. For those of you who have not played the game, essentially what happens is in a traditional Legend of Zelda game, you go to a dungeon, and when you're going throughout this dungeon, you find a treasure chest, and that treasure chest will contain a tool or an item, and usually that item is then utilized to help you complete the dungeon and ultimately defeat the bad guy. For example, you get the power bracelet in one of the games, which allows you to lift up the bad guys. It was like an evil genie, and you can throw his pot against the wall and crack his pot open, and that's how you defeat him. You get the Pegasus boots. All this is coming from Link's Awakening because I just played it recently. You get the Pegasus boots, and you have to charge at the character. But all these things are contained within the dungeon. In this game, they changed things up a little bit. They introduced a character called Ravio, who is kind of a car salesman type of character. Used car salesman type of character. And very cowardly. But he has all these weapons that you can either purchase for a very high price tag, or you can rent them from him for a smaller price tag. The only downside of renting them, and this is such a really interesting concept that they introduced here, is the upside of renting them is that you can get a hold of these tools or weapons at a much earlier point in the game
for a much cheaper price.
For a much cheaper price. The downside is if you die when you're holding on to these weapons, Ravio will come and take them back. So if you need them for that particular dungeon, you have to then go back to him, pay him another fee, if you have the rupees, to get that tool to utilize it once again. And then obviously if you get enough rupees, it's a very high price point. I think it's to rent it, it's maybe 40 rupees or something like that. And then to purchase it, it's between 4 and 500.
1,400.
Oh, 1,400. Oh, even higher.
For some of the weapons.
Even
some
higher.
of them are cheaper, but I remember the ice rod, the flame rod. They'll run you back 1,400 rupees, which is a fair amount.
And at that point, you have bought it from him. You own it, and if you die, he cannot take it back.
Yes.
So it's a really interesting concept. So since he has this shop centrally located at your home in the top world,
he kind of breaks in and
he does. He makes himself at home. And sets up shop. And you can essentially you can rent these items, and as a result of that, you can go to these dungeons in any order. So that was really a long roundabout way of expanding upon the idea that you have a lot of freedom in this game.
Yes, freedom, rupees, and it goes to the great level design, which is one of the next pro we have, which utilizes not only if you have these items, but if you don't have these items. You do have to get all the items to complete the game.
Right.
But you don't have to buy a single one of them.
Right.
You can rent all of them and still get through the game perfectly fine. You can buy all of them and get through the game perfectly fine. It really is a testament to how great the level designs are.
Right. Well, I think going back to the one point there is that, in previous Zelda games, there was an assumption that by the time you reached a certain level, you had certain tools available. So they could build certain puzzles and certain interactions that is reliant upon that assumption. In this game, you cannot rely upon that assumption anymore. You have to go under the assumption that the only tool that individual person has is whatever tool that you've outlined is denoted for that particular dungeon. As a result of that, they had to work very hard to make each dungeon interesting while only relying on maybe one, maybe two
items.
Specific items. So I really give them a lot of credit for that, the fact that they were able to make interesting dungeons, interesting dungeon design without having to rely on something that has been so much of a staple of the Zelda franchise.
Yes.
Having certain combinations of certain tools that will allow you to do different things. Like the fact that they were able to work around that, I think is really a testament to the work that they put into this game.
Yep, definitely. So the next probe that we have is although they do, like in many Zelda games, they rehash a lot.
They have
of
their classics.
The weapons.
Not rehash. They have
their classics. The boomerang, the flame rod, the ice rod, stuff like that. They did introduce some neat new ones. The tornado rod.
The tornado rod. That's one that sticks out.
Which sticks out a lot in my mind, and the sand rod.
Yep. Is
another one that sticks out. And
that was an interesting tool too.
It was just kind of cool to see some
interesting puzzle elements as a result of
that. As a result of these weapons and boss battles and enemy fights as a result of these weapons. It was just kind of a neat thing to see. It should be expected, and you do see it in a lot of the Zelda games to see the new weapons being introduced. But it was fun to see some old classics remade, and to see some new weapons hopefully introduced and show up again.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about the Zelda franchise is every couple of games they put something new in there to try to, just to see, because either it fits the game mechanics or they're just trying something new. And, sometimes it works really well, sometimes it sticks, and sometimes you don't see it again. I mean, if you think about the original Legend of Zelda game, they had the ladder and they had the raft. They had the recorder, which they never came back to the recorder. That kind of evolved into the ocarina. But then in that original Zelda game, they have things that have been a staple of the franchise ever since: the boomerang, the sword, the shield, the bombs, the bow, the power bracelet. There are things that are definitely staples. Yes. So definitely some cool new weapons, and a good implementation of some old ones.
Yes, definitely. You want to take the next one?
Sure. Yeah, the paint wall mechanic. So in the plot of this game, essentially what happens is the villain turns you into a painting, and I think it's as a result of the Triforce, you are able to break that spell. I forget exactly why.
It is a result of the Ravio bracelet.
That's right, the Ravio bracelet.
When Ravio first breaks in, he gives you a bracelet as essentially
a sign of friendship.
A sign of friendship, yep.
Okay.
And when he gets the spell cast, the Triforce does play into it. Yeah. It allows him to morph to the wall as a painting, and a painting on the wall, being able to move the wall.
You can walk on these flat surfaces as if it was like a side scroller. And what's really interesting there is it's almost kind of like a throwback to like Zelda 2, where you had the side scrolling, and then even in Zelda A Link to the Past there was side scrolling elements there too, but in such a different way than they've executed here. But I wonder if there was kind of a purposeful nod there. It's interesting that in that aspect you've kind of got two nods back to the original NES games. The fact that you have that freedom, which to me feels like a nod back to the original Legend of Zelda, and now you have the side-scrolling element, which feels like kind of a nod back to
the
Link's Adventure.
Family,
Link's Adventure, yeah.
Link's Adventure.
So you have this new element, and this new element is really interesting because what it essentially lets you do, it uses like almost like a magic meter, which we'll touch upon more a little bit later. It uses essentially like a little magic meter, and you're able to stick to the wall for a limited period of time. And what this allows you to do is to get to new areas. So for example, if you're on a cliff face and you have this wall along, but there's an open area, so you can't actually walk to the other side, what you can do is you can then stick yourself kind of up against the wall as a painting and walk across the wall and then pop out on the other side. And so as a result of that, you end up with some really cool mechanics. And what I think, this is what I think really saved them in regards to what I was talking about earlier, in the fact that they could not rely on somebody having multiple tools, but they could always rely on somebody having that tool plus this functionality. So whatever tool for that dungeon plus this functionality, resulted in some really cool puzzles and some really interesting executions on those puzzles.
Yes.
There were quite a few that had me that were challenging for me for quite a little while. And then finally you get it and you're like, oh, okay, that's it. I need to go here and go there. And it really challenges you to look at this 3D space and think of it in a different way.
Yep. And almost look at that 3D space as a 2D space, and it's just it's amazing to see what they implemented with this mechanic, which with Zelda games they're famous with introducing a mechanic in a game and implementing it very well into said game. So it shouldn't be a huge surprise to anyone that they did it great in this game as well.
Yeah. These next two, I'm actually going to take these from you because these two are actually mine anyway.
Yeah.
And I'm going to lump them together. So there was an interesting concept of low rule. So the idea is basically that there's Hyrule, the standard Hyrule that people have always known and loved, but unbeknownst to you, in this mirror underneath world, which I'm sorry, maybe I'm thinking of Stranger Things a little bit, but but essentially that is the concept they go with, is that there is also with Hyrule there is low rule, and in low rule they have their own version of the Triforce, which is actually an upside down version of the standard Triforce. And there's kind of almost like mirror-ish characters there. There is a princess there that is like a brunette version of Zelda.
Princess Hilda, yep.
So that's a very cool concept.
She's actually an essential character.
Absolutely, yeah. Is it
Hilda?
Hilda. I was going to say Hilda.
Princess Hilda.
And then we also find out, my other pro here is the Ravio character, who is this character who is selling you things throughout the game, who you think is just this kind of shopkeeper. I won't say what it is because I don't want to spoil anything, but you do find a cool little reveal about him towards the end of the game. That's just an interesting add, to the mythos of the game.
Yeah, and I won't lie, the reveal took me by surprise. I actually did not see it coming. I did not
see it either, but I mean, I did not see it coming, but once they said it, once they revealed it, I was like, of course. Like,
yes. Yep.
Oh my god, like how did I not put this together beforehand? Just very, very
just
cool.
A cool little thing.
Yeah.
And the last pro, it's a little one. They brought in a upgrading mechanic that was seen previously in Skyward Sword, sort of, where you get to upgrade your weapons by finding these little
I call them Mai-Mais.
Mai-Mais.
I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it, but that's the way I always read it in my head.
But it was a fun little system to be able to collect the Mai-Mais, upgrade your weapons, and get the next bigger version of it, the nice version, as they call it. So just a little thing, just a little fun thing. It helped extend the life of the game because you wanted to find them all. You wanted to get all the upgrades for the weapons, the better bombs, better fire rod, and all that stuff. So it was a fun little side quest to do.
Very cool.
So
let's start with the cons. You take this first one. I'll take the next one.
Like I've said in the previous video, A Link to the Past is my favorite game. So when I heard that they were making a official sequel to it, I was beyond excited. I love this game, don't get me wrong. This is a very good game, but I feel they rely very, very much too heavily on A Link to the Past. The map is, like you said before, it is almost a one-to-one. It's
almost a one-for-one
design, the same design as the map from A Link to the Past. It has a very similar structure where you get the 3 items and then you go to the low rule, which is like the dark world in A Link to the Past, which that in and of itself is also designed almost exactly the same.
Similarly,
with they even have like the same places like the Thieves Town and Turtle Rock and all these places that return. So that was a little disappointing to rely so heavily on a game that is over 20 years old to make your new game. It's like I already know this world.
Well, I think what ends up happening is it doesn't feel like a sequel as much as it feels like a rehash.
Yeah.
And not even a remake. It's a rehash. And if you don't mind me co-opting, we can continue to talk about this. It kind of leads into my con for this, which the rehash really resulted in a lot of confusion for me. Because I am so familiar with A Link to the Past, when I was playing this game, I would be going through, and I would go to look for a secret in a certain location, thinking that the secret was there because it was there in A Link to the Past, and then I'd realize, oh, that's not here, or it wasn't there because it's not the same game. So it was really confusing because you're playing this game, you're looking at it, it looks like A Link to the Past, it feels like A Link to the Past, and it's done excellently, but you expect it to behave like Link to the Past sometimes, and it doesn't always, and that can be confusing.
And it's because it's not A Link to the Past.
No.
It's just not, and it was just kind of a little disappointing to have this game I was looking so forward to really be. I mean,
not add much new
to the world
right.
of A Link to the Past, which was a game
if you figure a certain amount of time has passed, you could have had that same world and had it have grown and evolved and changed as a result of the actions from A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
And then the underworld or the low rule could have been something similar, but could be a completely different variation on that new world. So it was just an enjoyable game, but perhaps a missed opportunity.
Yes. Yep. Definitely. We talked about the meter a little earlier when we were talking about the paint mechanic. Well, that meter happens to be your meter for everything.
Everything that you do.
The arrows, there's no arrow count, you use that meter. There's no bomb count, you use that meter. There's no magic. There's no magic meter, so your flame rod, your ice rod, everything uses that one meter.
So on the one hand, so it's kind of like a pros and cons situation. On the one hand, what's neat about that is that meter slowly refills on its own. So you throw down a couple of bombs and you max out that meter. You can't throw out any more bombs, but that will rebuild itself.
Yeah.
So
you'll be able to get back.
On the same hand, on the one hand, you essentially have unlimited arrows or unlimited bombs, but if you're not careful and you throw out too many arrows at once, you could be out of arrows when you really need arrows. As opposed to if you just had the max 60 arrows, you you have 60 arrows and you know what you got to do. So I mean, and I guess the same could be said. Well, you should know how many are as a result of your magic meter and just plan accordingly. But it can be a little frustrating when you're used to having a set amount and then you go and you collect more, you buy more. To have this kind of arbitrary meter associated it can be frustrating.
Yeah, and it kind of stinks. They probably did it to kind of offset the fact that rupees are now more important to the game, sure. Where you're no longer buying supplies.
Well, the other thing is that if you're not, if you don't own one of these items, you're not going to want to go out and purchase arrows. I don't know if the bow and arrow is one that falls within that criteria, but you're not going to want to go out and purchase arrows for a bow and arrow that you don't own, because what if you load up on arrows and then you die and you lose the bow and arrow?
Yeah.
Do you get to keep the arrows? Do you lose the arrows? How does that work? So it enters questions that you have to then, as a designer, level designer and game designer, have to figure out, and that can be difficult.
Yeah. So this one is
just for fun.
This is a throwback to many a classic memes online that have been thrown around. Link doesn't have pink
He's got no pink hair.
A Link to the Past. If you play it,
we did. Well, let's just preface. We did say in A Link to the Past, one of the cons was pink hair. Why the hell does he have pink hair?
Yeah.
But that being said, that's been established. Link has pink hair. that's the world that we've been born into, and that's what we've been given. And now we got no pink hair. Like, you gave us pink hair, and now you're taking away our pink hair. Why no pink hair?
Yeah, which, I mean, is it a huge con?
No, it's not. It's completely trivial.
But he only has pink hair in A Link to the Past. He doesn't have pink hair anywhere else.
It's got to be a color palette thing.
It probably was.
Yeah.
But regardless, he's got no pink hair in this game. Mm-hmm. It's back to blonde.
So this last one is kind of mine.
Yeah.
And you may or may not agree with me on this one. But in general, I felt the game was slightly forgettable. And there could be a couple of reasons for this. It could be because there's so much of a reliance on A Link to the Past that I remember A Link to the Past instead of aspects of this game. And now that being said, I could go back and play A Link to the Past after I've played this and get confused and look for some of the secrets that are associated with this game. But, I mean, again, ultimately, like, are you disservicing both games by that much reliance? But, aside from that point, essentially what it came down to is I had played this game through, I completed it, I borrowed it from my brother, and I didn't own the game. I borrowed it from Alex. I played it through, I beat it, I enjoyed it, I gave it back to him. And then we were talking about doing this trilogy of the Link to the Past games. And ultimately I found myself having to go back to him and say, hey, can I borrow that again? I actually don't remember a lot of it in order for us to put together a pros and cons list. And that to me is unfortunate. So, there could be a couple of explanations there. Like I said, it could be, like I said previously, the Link to the Past association, and I'm just remembering A Link to the Past instead of this game. It could also be that, A Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, we've played those so many times that we know those games inside and out. We know every little nook and cranny of them. We're so familiar with them because we've played them probably hundreds, maybe thousands of times.
Nostalgia, maybe.
Not necessarily nostalgia, but familiarity. The fact that we've played it so many times. And I've only played this game through once. So that being said, if I were to play it through, multiple times, would I still be saying that? I don't know. But as of right now, I would say this game kind of came across as forgettable to me, and that's certainly not something that I felt the first time I played A Link to the Past, the first time I played Link's Awakening, the first time I played Ocarina of Time, any of those Zelda games. So that's my that's my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and I think I think you're right. I think it has to do with the fact that it is a direct sequel and it uses so much reliance on the A Link to the Past. I think that's why you do get it is a little forgettable, because A Link to the Past was just that much better of a game. Mm-hmm. Not that this is a bad game, but A Link to the Past is an amazing game.
Yeah.
And it's hard to top it, and to have a game that is so...
It's hard to recapture that magic.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back and you see that a lot, especially in Hollywood nowadays, where they're trying to go back to these old franchises and, recapture lightning in a bottle. And sometimes they're able to do it, and other times they just can't quite make it work.
Yeah, a lot of times they just can't make it work.
Yeah. So we've done our pros, we've done our cons. Let's talk about grades for today. Alex, what grade would you give A Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds?
For me, it gets a B+.
B+.
It's a very good game. Definitely, if you have a 3DS, pick it up if you haven't already. But it's not one of those games where it's like you need to go buy a 3DS just to play this game.
Yeah.
This is a game that if you have a 3DS, buy it.
Pick it up. Yeah.
Just go pick it up, and it's worth the playthrough.
Yeah, I would say similarly, my grade would be a B. And the only reason why I did a B instead of a B+ is because I did feel I enjoyed it slightly less than you. That being said, perfectly good game, perfectly enjoyable game. I would play it again. I certainly would like to, take the time to go through and play it again. I liked the game. It was an interesting story. It had some interesting concepts, and in some interesting characters, and I wouldn't mind revisiting that world again. So all in all, in spite of our cons, still very solid game.
Still a very solid game, like I said. If you have a 3DS, play it. But you can pick the game up. It's fairly on the cheap side, $20-30. And if you have a 3DS, pick it up. It's worth it.
Very cool.
All right.
So I think, sadly, that concludes our Link to the Past trilogy reviews.
It does, and it's a little. It is a little sad because, like I said, A Link to the Past is my favorite game.
Link's Awakening is mine.
And to round out the 3 games, you get A Link Between Worlds, which is a stellar game, but fails to recapture that magic.
It's kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of a melding of those 2 games. It's the portable aspect that you had from Link's Awakening, combined with the world and some of the feel from A Link to the Past. It's kind of a neat combination of the 2 of them.
It is. I look at this game and I really do like it. It really was a dream of mine to see them make a sequel to A Link to the Past. So for that reason, I do love it.
Now they just need to do a sequel to Link's Awakening.
Yeah, well,
probably not, but one can dream. So I think that basically concludes our show for today. We thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed our trilogy of reviews for these Legend of Zelda franchise games. And
Legend of Zelda will return.
Legend of Zelda certainly will return.
There's
no
Zelda reviews.
Lack of Zelda games for us to review. But on that note, thank you guys for joining us, and we hope you guys will join us again.